why, first off, like why the name Ego Death Capital? Like, what's the story here? This isn't like the typical name that I'm kind of running into. So give
Yeah.
us the story, give us the story. And then I have some questions for you guys about your values and specifically your pillars that you have on your website. But yeah, give us the story about your name here. What's going on?
So we were doing like a branding naming exercise, Andi, myself, and my wife, Lauren, who her background is kind of this. And we're talking about the transition that's happening. We're talking about other momentous moments in like history, time, Big Bang, helium, like all of that. And Andi, I think it was me or Lauren said, like, what is that called in like a psychedelic journey or meditation when you lose that sense of self? And Andi jumped in with the name Ego Death. And we like toss it around a little bit. We're like, that's really powerful. That's really, is that too powerful? Is that too much? Can we run with that? Andi slept on it, and like the next morning was like, that's it. Like,
I had dreams about it all night. I was just like dreaming
it.
about the name Ego Death Capital. And I was like, yes, it's the right name. Let's do it.
And that was just Andi and I at the time period. So then we bring Jeff on and we're like, okay, here's the test. Does this work with him? Meanwhile, like Jeff is one of the few people, I think the number is like 1 in a million that can get to like ego death through meditation. And so was very familiar with this concept and the transition and what that goes with. And he was like, I love it. Let's do it.
And then it really represents for us, I guess, this concept of going from the transitional moment we're going through of the structure as it is right now, which is very ego-based. If you think about Wall Street, we think about those in power and the money and the structures and the lobbying and all of that, which is really about making money and more money for those in power. So it's very ego-based, to something that we're really shifting to. And I think this is exactly what you were just saying, to something that's community oriented, that's bringing people together, that's distributed, that's decentralized. And I think it's really, there's so many different trends happening in the world. One of them is psychedelics, meditation, this kind of spiritual, whatever you want to call it, shift, but then also community and community formation. And if we think about what the church used to provide, and humans have always existed in kind of communities and bands, and it's really the last few decades where all of those structures have been just destroyed in a way. We left the church, but we didn't actually rebuild community structures, and that's led to so much dislocation, pain, suffering, loneliness, which is causing mental health epidemics, physical health. And so this coming together of community is really powerful. And I think that's one of the things that makes Bitcoin really powerful, is the community it's coming together. And like you said, everyone being able to not just, like, the amount you can do individually is so much less than what you can do when you come together as a collective, and everyone brings their own strengths and kind of creating a movement. I think
if you had to guess, where does that, so Andi, we'll start with you then. Where does that come from, this whole concept of ego death for you? I want to ask about what type of investments you're doing and why you're doing what you're doing in a second, but now I'm curious on this. Where does this come from? Because I think each of us go through our own journey to kind of maybe challenge our ego or kind of get rid of your ego.
I mean, I've worked a lot with various plant medicines, and so I've had various experiences.
I like how you smile when you say that. Yeah, got it.
I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say.
Yeah.
But for me, it's been very, very powerful in healing. And if we think about ego death, there's nothing wrong with the ego per se, but it's what gives us our identity. It's what allows us to navigate through the world as people. But where we got to was really identifying with the ego and attaching to the ego and needing, we didn't have community structures, so we've been really needing to do everything for ourselves and prioritize ourselves, and that's come at the expense of others. And so the ego death is, you can have that experience where you completely lose the sense of self, but what it actually, the benefit is then recognizing that we're all interconnected, that we're all kind of one human species here together on the planet effectively, and we're all individuals and we do our own path, but we're part of a collective and we're part of a community, and our actions need to reflect that it's not all just about ourselves, it's about doing something which is of benefit for our community as well.